What's up guys, Asian here again with another pre-PTS Greymoor video, and today we're going to be taking a look at the 7 sets that were introduced in the Greymoor sneak peek video. So these two images are from Nephis' website, it's a link in the description below to that website, as well as a link to his Greymoor sneak peek video that he released on Monday. So we have 4 trial sets to go over and 3 crafted sets. They did not go over the 3 dropped sets from Greymoor, so Greymoor is going to be a new zone, so there should be 3 dropped sets as well from the Greymoor zone itself. We did not see those, we only saw the 3 craftable and these 4 trial sets, which is coming in the trial Kyne's Aegis. So we're going to start with the trial sets and then move on to the crafted sets. So this is just going to be my thoughts based on what I see currently with these trial sets. Kyne's Wind is the light, one of the 2 light trial sets here. 2-piece adds Magicka regen, the 3-piece adds Minor Aegis, the 4-piece adds Healing Done. Nephis put down X, but we all know that the armor bonuses for 2, 3, 4-piece bonuses, they're all standardized, so we know it's going to be 129 Magicka regen, we know it's going to be 4% additional Healing Done. 5-piece casting ability or drinking a potion that applies a major buff on yourself or an ally creates a pool of Kyne's Blessing for X seconds. You and allies standing in Kyne's Blessing restore X stamina and magicka every X seconds. This effect can occur once every X seconds. There are going to be perfect versions of this set, and the perfect version adds 129 magicka regen to the 5-piece. So this seems like essentially a sustain-oriented set. Now, don't know how long the pool lasts. We don't know what the cooldown is, so we don't know whether the uptime is going to be 40%, 50%, 80%, 100%. It also depends on whether you have the ability to proc it off on cooldown, depending on what that cooldown is. We also don't know how much stamina and magicka is we're getting every X amount of seconds. Let's say it returns 100 stamina and magicka every second for 10 seconds once every 15 seconds. Even that might be worth using if you need additional sustain. So this pretty much acts more or less like the Master's Restoration Staff. I won't say the Master's Restoration Staff is dead because of the introduction of this set, because you could just run both this set and the Master's Restoration Staff, basically double down on your resource return. But it's nice to have basically a DPS agnostic resource return. So this is not like Worm, it's not like Hercene where it only benefits one type of DPS, this affects both types of DPS. So this is actually pretty beneficial, especially for groups that have trouble sustaining. For a lot of endgame groups, like very high-end progression groups, probably won't be using this set because sustain is already pretty decent as is with Symphony of Blades. Plus, the light attack changes that are currently on the PTS will help boost their sustain even further. So not 100% sure whether Kyne's Wind is going to make its way into trial group, an organized trial group, but it's definitely a set that I would probably say you should pick up and hold on to, just in case sustain does end up dropping significantly in Greymoor. So definitely something I would recommend holding on to if you are a healer or a tank. Now, the problem is the proc condition. You need to have something that applies a major buff to yourself or an ally. For some classes, this is going to be a lot easier. For example, Wardens, you guys have Ice Fortress and Expansive Frostcloak. Let's say you create a pool every 15 seconds, or the cooldown is every 15 seconds. You can just cast Expansive Frostcloak and you'll be able to proc it every 15 seconds, since that applies Major Resolve. Or let's say a DK tank or a DK healer, you can run Igneous Shield or Fragmented Shield. That gives you Major Mending, Major buff, so you can go. It's pretty easy for you to proc it that way. Now, if we take a look at, let's say, a Templar healer, Templar healers, off the top of my head, they don't have any ability that gives you a major buff. That's not something like Jabs, for example. Power of the Light gives you minor, and it's not a buff, it's a debuff. You get minor mending from your passive bonus, minor sorcery from your passive bonus. Can't think of a major buff that's provided outside of the rune. I'm blanking on the actual name. Rune Focus. That does give you Major Resolve. So you could run that. The problem is a lot of Templar healers don't need to run it right now because of sustain. That might change based on the sustain changes in Greymoor. So it might be a little bit more challenging for a Templar healer, for example, to proc it if you don't need to run Channeled Focus for the additional magicka return. But on the flip side, this might force Templar healers to run channel focus, and that will end up reducing your flexibility in terms of bar slots. So kind of a mixed bag here with Kyne's Wind. Moving down the list here, Roaring Opportunist, which is the second light armor set from Kyne's Aegis. The 2-piece adds Spell Penetration, 3-piece adds Minor Slayer. Spell Penetration you get is going to be 1,487. The 4-piece adds 129 spell damage. 5-piece dealing damage with a fully charged heavy attack to an enemy that's been set off balance. Grants you and up to 11 group members Major Slayer, increasing your damage done to dungeon, trial, and arena monsters by X%, 15% because that's Major Slayer, for X seconds. Roaring Opportunist can only affect a target every X seconds. The favorite version adds 1096 Max Magicka to the 5-piece. So this is a set that's been talked about quite a bit since Monday, and it's not going to be a DPS set. Yes, I know it has Minor Slayer, it has Spell Pen, it has Spell Damage, it has Max Magic. Yes, that's all great and good. But the 5-piece definitely gears itself more as a support-oriented set than an actual DPS-oriented set. This is based on the fact that even on the PTS right now, light attack builds are still pulling ahead of fully charged heavy attack builds when both builds are optimized. So fully optimized heavy attack builds are still doing worse DPS than fully optimized light attack builds. So there's really no reason for a magic DPS to run a heavy attack build. Now exceptions might be made for something like a Magicka Sorcerer. The gap there is probably going to be a little bit smaller than, let's say, like a Mag DK or a Magicka Nightblade running a heavy attack build. That being said, though, why put this on a magsorc when you can just put it on a healer? So healers right now do have one sort of flex spot right now for their sets, so you could run Roaring Opportunist on a healer instead and just have 8 magic DPS just all run raw DPS sets instead. So that's kind of the argument against putting it on a DPS there. Now, the one thing that we don't know is the uptime. So let's say it only gives us Major Slayer for 5 seconds, but it can only proc every 15 seconds or so. That gives us a maximum uptime of about 33%. Now, I think it is going to be probably, so remember, off balance was changed in Hero Storm for 7 seconds up, 15 seconds down. So my guess is it is going to last, this is my prediction, you can put this down on paper if you'd like. I'm going to guess it's going to last for 10 seconds, and it can only affect a target every 15 seconds. That'll give us a 66% uptime on Major Slayer. That is roughly what you would expect to see with Lokkestiiz with one synergy. So now the question for stamina DPS is, you still want to run Lokkestiiz if we're running Roaring Opportunist, if Roaring Opportunist becomes a meta healer set. Is it worth dropping the 100% uptime on Major Slayer to basically replace Lokkestiiz with another DPS-oriented set? First set that comes to mind for me is going to be Advancing Yokeda. Is it going to be worth it? Who knows? We're going to have to test it on the DPS in order to find out. Now, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that because I do need somebody to wear this set for me, but I'm going to try to find somebody who's willing to sit on the PTS for 2 hours with me to test this out here to see whether stamina DPS are going to want to run Lokkestiiz or something else, like Advancing Yokeda or some other oriented set, maybe Thogvin's or something like that. Moving on to the right, upper right, we have Vrol's Command, which is a heavy trial set. 2-piece adds 1096 max stamina, you gain minor Aegis. 4-piece adds 10, it's going to be more than that, 1206 max health, I believe it is. Then the 5-piece, after dealing damage with a fully charged heavy attack, you apply Major Aegis, and we're going to stop there. Want to know why? Major Aegis is a pointless buff. It was never used before when it was first introduced in Halls of Fabrication with automated defense, and it's never going to be used. That being said, Major Aegis may be beneficial for progression groups. That being said, it only affects 5 and 5 nearby group members, so only half of your trial group. You need both tanks to run Vrol's Command if you want to apply this to everybody. So, this set, not worth farming for. Major Aegis is not a worthy buff. There are better ways to get damage reduction if you're in a group that needs a damage reduction. Not worth running. Pretty much end of discussion with Vrol's Command. Now, they might change it when the PTS goes live, but I'm not going to be optimistic about that. Finally, we have Yandir's Might, which is the medium trial set. 2-piece adds 129 weapon damage. You gain Minor Slayer with the 3-piece. The 4-piece adds 129 stamina regen. 5-piece, dealing critical damage, grants you a stack of Giant's Endurance up to once per second. Stack of Giant's Endurance adds X stamina recovery and stacks up to X times. Dealing damage with a fully charged heavy attack removes Giant's Endurance and grants Giant's Might for X seconds. Weapon damage by X per stack removed. Cannot have both of these active at the same time. The perfect version adds 1487 physical penetration to 5-piece. Now this interesting set, but I also have issues with this set as well because of that fully charged heavy attack. You're gonna want to first of all just talk about the 5-piece in a vacuum, sort of by itself. The additional stamina regen. This basically is sort of like you're gonna try to get the stacks up for the stamina regen, and then you're gonna do the heavy attack, get the huge bonus to weapon damage, and then just sort of repeat itself. So this is basically more or less going to be a pattern, basically, if you're going to be running this set. Part of it's going to depend on how many stacks you can get and how long Giant's Might buff lasts. Let's say it lasts for 5 seconds, and you can stack up to 5 of the stacks of Giant's Endurance. That might actually it's going to be interesting, because using that example, basically you would wait until you get those 5 stacks going. With all the dots that you're running as stam DPS, you have Endless Hail, Poison Injection perhaps, and whatever other sort of dots you might be running as a class dot, you might be able to get those stacks up in those 5 seconds, in which case on the 6th second, you'd be doing that heavy attack, you're going to get the additional weapon damage boost, and then just that'll repeat every 5 seconds. So this does introduce an interesting gameplay mechanic, but at the same time, it boils back down to what I was talking about with Roaring Opportunity. Fully optimized light attack builds for stamina and magicka are still doing better than fully optimized heavy attack builds. And introducing this heavy attack every X seconds, it introduces a sort of complexity to the rotation, which I might like. It really depends on how much of a bonus we're getting with Giant. So let's say it is 5 stacks and we get 60 weapon damage per stack removed. That's 300 weapon damage when we get all 5 stacks. Plus, obviously, the modifiers and things like that. That might not be useful, because you're basically giving up. You think about the uptime on that, you can't have both Giant's Endurance and Might active at the same time, so you can't generate stacks for the next Giant's Might while you're currently affected by it. If it's 5 seconds, 5 seconds, for duration of 5 seconds, 5 stacks, you're basically looking at a 50% uptime on whatever your weapon damage bonus is. Now, obviously, the stack number and seconds duration aren't necessarily going to line up. Let's say it stacks up to 10 times and it lasts for 5 seconds. In that instance, you'd be taking a look. Again, you'd have 5 seconds on, 10 seconds off. You're looking at 33% uptime on a sizably larger weapon damage bonus, but still not going to be, 100% uptime. So it really depends on what your effective weapon damage bonus is once we know how many stacks you get and how long the Giant's Might buff actually lasts for. So I'm reserving judgment on Yandir's Might, but I just don't like, it doesn't jive with me, the whole you have to use a fully charged heavy attack in order to proc it. Something doesn't sit right with me. But that's it for the trial set. So basically, in summary, don't bother with Roll's Command, reserving judgment on Yandir's Might until we get actual numbers. Roaring Opportunist is going to be good for healers. Kyne's Win, hold on to it as a healer, but you might not use it because Roaring Opportunist is probably going to be better used, depending on obviously how Sustain looks in Greymoor. Moving on next to the craftable sets, there's 3 craftable sets here. We don't know how many traits you need to know in order to craft these, but if previous chapters were any indication, it should be 4, 6, and 8. Don't know exactly which ones are going to be which though. Dragon's Appetite adds weapon damage, stamina regen. The 5-piece increases damage done to bleeding enemies by X, so this looks like another flat bonus to damage done, so very similar, like the Stagger debuff. Dealing non-bleed damage to bleeding enemies generates a persistent stack of Dragon's Appetite up to once per second. After X stacks, you consume Dragon's Appetite and heal for X health. This might be good for like solo play, like I'm thinking VMA if you have bleeding applied through, let's say, twin slashes. That might be beneficial, but 2 stamina regen, that hurts. That hurts me. It's not going to be great for DPS, so I don't see Dragon's Appetite being particularly good, except maybe for VMA for those guys who need the additional heal and have access to some sort of, maybe like a Stamina Warden running Growing Swarm. Then we have Stoon's Favor. It adds weapon and spell damage, physical and spell pen, weapon and spell damage again. The 5-piece increases your physical and spell pen by X against off-balance enemies. Not going to be useful for PvE because of that 7 seconds on, 15 seconds off for off-balance. Potentially for PvP, I'm not sure, so those of you guys who play more PvP can probably let me know whether or not it's going to be good or not, but it doesn't seem to be, it doesn't really kind of blow me out of the water with the 5-piece bow. Finally, we have Spell Parasite, we have Spell Damage, Spell Crit, Max Magicka, already looking pretty good for bonuses here for 2, 3, and 4. 5-piece, whenever you deal damage, you restore X Magicka. This effect can occur once every X seconds. This is basically a different version of Seducer. So Seducer is a base game craftable set that reduces the cost of your magic abilities by, I want to say it's like 3 or 4% or something like that. The bonuses for Seducer aren't quite as good. I believe one of them is a Magicka regen bonus. But Spell Parasite, this might actually be pretty decent for beginners who might need additional sustain. So I can see this being useful for beginner DPS. So like just thinking off the top of my head as a theory crafter, as a content creator, I can see a beginner build running something like New Moon Acolyte with Spell Parasite to offset the additional cost increase to your abilities from New Moon Acolyte there. So definitely a set that looks good for beginner DPS who might have trouble sustaining things, just sort of like on a DPS rotation. But that's pretty much it. So again, we are still missing the 3 dropped sets from the Greymoor zone. Don't know what those are, but generally speaking, the craftable sets, the only one that looks good is going to be Spell Parasite for beginners. Then the trial sets, the 2 light armor sets are going to be pretty solid for healers. Heavy set, don't bother as a tank, and the medium set, I am reserving judgment based on what the bonuses are. But that's pretty much it for this video. I will have links in the description below to Nev's website with all the Greymoor sneak peek information, as well as a link to his video as well, if you guys prefer a more visual format. But yeah, let me know down in the comment section below what you guys think of these sets. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.